Hi students, and welcome to today's live IELTS class. My name is Adrian. I'm streaming to you from beautiful Victoria here, the Garden City on the west coast of Canada. I hope everybody has had a great week and is looking forward to a fantastic weekend. Welcome again, Nut, and once again, good luck on your exam tomorrow. Welcome, Carolina, our moderator. Kurbanali, good to have you in the class. Rumi, welcome. Your waiting is over. Jenny Mohit, nice to see more members. In today's class, we are looking at an IELTS listening section, specifically looking at Part 3 and Part 4. This is a continuation from yesterday's lesson where we started with Part 1 and 2. If you missed that, no worries. Each of these parts are unique, so lots of learning, lots of practice, and you can always check these videos later for the previous ones on the channel. This lesson is presented to you by aehelp.com. For academic IELTS success, check us out there. For the general IELTS, visit us at gieltshelp.com. That's gieltshelp.com, where we've got loads of materials on help for the general IELTS exam. Our websites look like this. We will be using these today for our listening. This is our academic IELTS website here with the blue background. You can click this big red button to join our premium IELTS package. It's a one-time payment for lifetime access, so it's really worth it. Doesn't cost very much at all. And the general IELTS, it's the green background. Again, click that big red button to join the premium package there. All right. We have apps. You can download those, Academic IELTS Help and General IELTS Help. And if you have questions, you can email me, adrian@aehelp.com. We've got a couple more classes tomorrow. We've got question and answer session for our members tomorrow, and then we've got a speaking part 3 practice and strategy class tomorrow at this time as well. Welcome, VG, to the class. Just kind of an important note here, from October 3rd to the 12th, we'll have no live classes. I'm gone on a short trip, so it's a holiday break for me, but I will be back on the 13th with speaking part 1. So just keep in mind that next week, no live classes, but next week we do have HD video releases. So check up on the channel. Make sure you check your notifications because we will have some really cool new speaking videos and other videos coming up in that time. So do stay in touch with us during this next week, as there will be some exciting materials to help you with IELTS coming on the channel. All right. So yesterday we covered part 1, part 2, and I talked about a strategy which focuses on reviewing the topic of each listening part during the interview time. So yesterday we realized that part 2 was about a team meeting at a company, and we listened to that. That was about their basically annual report of their company's progress in comparison to the previous year. And part 3, which we will listen to in just a moment, is an interview with an author. So it's some kind of an interview situation. And then part 4 will be some kind of a lecture on the history of roads. So those are the two topics that we're looking at today. Okay. Gave you some tips on capitalization and such. And now we will look at section 3, or they call it part 3 now since 2020. So I'm just going to go to our academic IELTS website here. log into my student account. Once in my student account, I can see all of my content, my computer-based IELTS exams, my full online academic course, my workbook study plans, lesson videos. There's tons of them. These are all drop-down menus, by the way. So you have all of your videos. And then we have our audio CDs. And because this is our 6th exam, I'm going to be playing the CD 6 track 3 because it's exam 6 part 3. Now, everyone, I'm playing the audio through my headset microphone. So if it's quiet for you, turn up your volume, use a headset. If the screen is not clear, set your screen to 720p resolution in YouTube. And don't put your answers in the chat. We will look at the answers together after we listen, and I'll talk some strategy then. So save your answers till the end. Give everybody a fair chance. Just write down your answers in a separate document or on a piece of paper, okay? All right, we are going to start this listening. Let's do this. All right, here we go. So, here we go.
Now turn to section 3. Take some time to look at questions 21 to 26. Listening, section 3. You will hear a radio host and his guest discussing the virtues of various art forms. Now listen carefully and answer questions 21 to 26.
All right, welcome back, everyone. Our next guest is the curator of a major art gallery in the city who has just released his 2nd book on the virtues of art. We're pleased to have Mr. Edgar Patterson here today. Welcome to the show, sir.
Thank you for having me on. It's a pleasure to be here, and please call me Edgar.
Edgar, of course. Now, in your first book, published 4 years ago, you focused on performance artwork such as plays, musical concerts, films, and other such works. Your 2nd book is a little closer to home for you. It concerns purely creative fine art.
Well, yes. It deals with the aesthetic virtue of different painting styles.
Okay, so give our viewers a quick rundown on what your book is about. Does it make an argument? I mean, does your book take a position on a certain issue in the world of art?
Yes. My book does take a position, and a rather radical one. The main thesis of my book is that the meaning we associate with a painting exists purely within ourselves. This is in stark contrast to many commentators who believe that the author of a painting gives the painting its meaning. Under this framework, if an artist intends his painting to represent the fear of an orphan child, then this is the one and only meaning such a painting can have. We might call this the intention theory of art. Conversely, my theory is that no matter what the intention of the author is, the meaning of the painting comes from the viewer. The meaning is exactly what the viewer thinks it is. This solves an important problem with the intention theory of art, namely that we do not have access to the mind of the artist, and therefore we do not have access to the painting's meaning at all.
Very interesting, Edgar. But doesn't the intention theory work as a sort of grounding for artistic analysis? What I mean is, while we might not know the meaning the artist intended, isn't the point of art to try to discern this meaning? If art is just whatever we want it to be or feel it as, doesn't that somehow make it less valuable?
That's an astute critique of my position, but one I have an answer for. My response is that art is not merely what we want it to be or feel it as. We can still participate in our critique and interpretation. All I want to say is, in the end, it is up to us to discern the meaning and value of paintings on our own.
You now have some time to look at questions 27 to 30. Now listen to the rest of the discussion and answer questions 27 to 30.
Now, let's talk about one type of controversial art, abstract art. How does your, can I call it a subjective theory of meaning?
Yes, that is fair.
Okay. How does your subjective theory of meaning apply to something like modern or abstract art? Art which doesn't tell an obvious story or have a clear meaning. Many people think that such works of art have no meaning at all.
It's certainly an interesting case, but one which my theory is well matched to deal with. You see, abstract art has its critics. Like you say, they think it has no meaning at all. However, other people think abstract works of art have all sorts of meanings. Now, under the intention theory, most of these commentators will be wrong, since the work of art either has a meaning or it doesn't, and if it does, then it only has a single meaning. So under the intention theory, only those critics who discern the specific meaning of the artist will be successful. My theory, however, results in each critic being correct in their own way. For example, if, after critically analysing a certain abstract work of art, I determine it is meaningless, then it is meaningless. Because the meaning of an artwork comes from within, I cannot be wrong, and neither can other people. The critic who sees a metaphor for suffering and the critic who views it as something entirely different are both right. We are all correct in our interpretation, as long as we've given the painting a fair critique.
What do you mean by a fair critique?
Well, I mean it is not enough to merely look at a painting and write it off immediately as meaningless. One must go through a certain process. That said, there are certainly other things.
That is the end of section 3. You will now have half a minute to check your answers.
All right, and always check those answers. Let me just stop the audio before we get into part 4. Let's look at these part 3 questions and talk about them. So here, you have two people discussing a book that this guest has written about understanding art or understanding the meaning of art. Okay, so let's start with this question 21. How many books has this guest written? Okay, and here you were listening for specifically the words first book and second book. So this author, Nguyen says C, Mohit, and Pukvin Le says it's actually B. Yeah, it is B. So it's B. It's 2 books because the guest says, well, your first book was about this topic, but your new book, your second book, is about this topic. So first and second together means 2 books. They do not speak about a third book. So multiple choice questions for part 3 and part 4 are more challenging. They're not going to say something like, oh, so you wrote 2 books. You won't hear that. You're going to hear more paraphrased type of answers, where in the audio you hear the speakers say your first book and your second book. And by understanding that, you realize that this author has written 2 books. Okay? So pay very, very careful attention to that paraphrasing. Fatima, Ali, very good. 2 books. Absolutely. Make sure that in your answer key, you don't accidentally put 2, okay? Because you'll get it wrong. So in your paper-based exam, it's a little bit easier to make a mistake because you'll only have like the block 21, and you actually have to put B in there. That'll be correct. If you accidentally put 2 in there, they'll mark that wrong, even though theoretically or technically it's correct. It's wrong according to the question. So be really careful. This is where the computer-based exam is a little bit easier, because the computer-based exam, you're literally just going to have to click on the second little circle and then you'll get it correct. Okay, so it's lower chance of mistake in the computer-based exam in this case. All right. Okay, so here you have question 22. What description does the guest give his book's thesis? So the book's thesis is the main idea of the book. And you have three choices here. A, it's a position. B, it's radical, meaning it's extreme. And C, it's the intention theory. Now, this was fairly tricky because you have to understand the meaning of the words a position, radical, intention theory. If you know the meaning of a position, it doesn't make sense, so you right away know that that cannot be the answer, right? It would be just weird to say that. Wouldn't make sense in natural English. B is a good answer. It's the correct answer. It is a radical one. And intention theory, they don't actually talk about that till later on. Now, let me show you something interesting with this. Like, let's, some people might be saying, Adrian, that's great, but I had difficulty understanding this question, and I had difficulty understanding each of these answers, right? So you're like, well, it's impossible for me to get this mark. It's not impossible, but it is difficult. However, there is a little bit of a trick, and I can show you that, okay? All right. So one kind of a trick if you're not sure about answers, and this isn't a guarantee. I'm not saying you're going to get the answer right for sure, but at least it will give you a chance. So if you're having, and I'm going to call this a trick because it's not, it's not the best solution, like really honestly speaking. It's not the best way to do an exam or to do this, but it might be the only way for you to do this, okay? So if you're having difficulty understanding some part of the speaking because of difficult vocabulary and or grammar, pay attention to the emphasis of words by deflection and inflection. The voice going up. Sorry, I should say down here. That's deflection. Okay. And inflection means the voice going up. The reason for this is that emphasized words are often the answer. Okay, let me try to show this or prove this to you with this question, all right? Everybody following me so far? So everybody is on the same page, okay? So you're having difficulty, you're not understanding the words, you're missing this part. And what's key here is that you try to catch where the deflection or inflection is and then write down that word in your notes. So write down the word that is being inflected or deflected. Okay. All right. Is everybody following me here? Okay, so far? Yeah, it looks like Jenny and Paulo are on the same page. Let me show you what I mean by this, okay? All right. All right. Here again, the question is, what description does the guest give his book? Okay. And let me go back to the audio here for a second. Okay, so somewhere around here in the beginning. Let me play this for you. And listen to when they're talking about like the content of the book, you're going to hear the man say, and a rather radical one. And there's a deflection there. There's a very clear deflection there. He goes, and a rather radical one. And you're going to hear that. So listen for that deflection. Okay?
Everyone, Our next guest is the curator of a major art gallery in the city who has just released his second book on the virtues of art. We're pleased to have Mr. Edgar Patterson here today. Welcome to the show, sir.
Thank you for having me on. It's a pleasure to be here, and please call me Edgar.
Edgar, of course. Now, in your first book, published 4 years ago, you focused on performance artwork such as plays, musical concerts, films, and other such works. Your second book is a little closer to home for you. It concerns purely creative fine art.
Well, yes, it deals with the aesthetic virtue of different painting styles.
Okay, so give our viewers a quick rundown on what your book is about. Does it make an argument? Does your book take a position on a certain issue in the world of art?
Okay, so here's the question. So here's where the interviewer is going, okay, so does it take a position in the world of art? So what is the book about, right? Like, what is the focus of the book? And now listen for the response from the author.
Yes, my book does take a position, and a rather radical one.
So did everybody hear that? He goes, yes, my book does take a position, and a rather radical one. And he deflects, right? So that's the point of his statement. You know from his deflection. In English has a lot of intonation, and intonation is used to emphasize key points, okay? And a lot of these questions are asking about the key points that are being stated in the conversation. So if you listen for those inflections and deflections, you can figure out the key point from that deflection, okay? I'll play that one more time just so you can hear that deflection once again, okay? Here we go.
So give our viewers a quick rundown on what your book is about. Does it make an argument? Does your book take a position on a certain issue in the world of art?
Yes, my book does take a position, and a rather radical one. The main thesis of...
So you hear that deflection, right? And a rather radical one. It's like, it's like, that's the end of my sentence. Okay, so that's how it works, all right? So pay attention to those. So that's just kind of a good tip, even if you are not sure what's going on, you're not sure of the words, and write that down. So you might not get the perfect spelling, but because it's multiple choice, it doesn't matter. You'll be able to find that, oh yeah, that was the word that he deflected, okay? All right. So it looks like many of you now have that clear. So remember that in the future. So don't give up. Even if the vocabulary is a bit tricky, don't give up. Just listen to those inflections and deflections, okay? Pachu Yadav is saying, it's a good technique, but it's difficult to identify the stresses of words in conversations. Pachu, good point. Make sure to practice identifying where stresses are. There's a lot of exercises in English where you have to identify where the stress is in the sentence. So if you haven't done this before, and thank you, Pachu, for mentioning that, okay? So if you have not done any identify the stress in the sentence exercises, make sure to do this before your IELTS exam, okay? I'm sure if you Google something like stress and intonation listening exercises, and you might even do something like PDFs, you'll probably come up with quite a few hits where you can practice this, and it's usually done with little check marks, like you have to put a little check mark. So when you see the stress, like if you have not done and identify the stress, so identify, so there would be the stress there. So usually what you do is you put a little check mark above the words that are being stressed, okay? So that's how that works, but you can do that. You can Google that, and there will be definitely exercises. It's a common kind of exercise, especially in some advanced English, okay? All right. Okay, let's keep going here before you all forget what your answers were for this listening part. Okay, so the correct answer for 22 was B, and a rather radical one. Number 23, which statement best describes the intention theory of art? Now, you eventually do need to understand some of this vocabulary. Of course, if you don't understand any of it, it's difficult. And intention here was very important. Intention means to do on purpose. So you do something because you want to do it, okay? So which statement best describes the intention theory of art, or we could almost call it the purposeful theory of art? The author creates an artwork's meaning. The meaning comes from the viewer. There's no meaning outside of the viewer's intention. So there's a piece of art, okay? The piece of art is a stick man. And you have the author, okay, or the painter who painted this piece of art, okay, and you have the viewer who is looking at this piece of art. So who gives this piece of art the meaning? Is it the author or is it the viewer? The viewer looks kind of like a one-eyed alien. So who gives it? Okay. All right. Carlos, yeah, you have to come up with your own answer for this first and then pick the right one. The intention theory says that it is the author who gives the meaning to the artwork. So A is the correct one, okay? So this is the common belief, okay, in the world of art, that art is given meaning by the artist. All right, so that is the intention theory of art, and that's the common theory of art. So here the correct answer was A. And yes, for multiple choice questions, it's very important that you're listening for the answer in the audio instead of staring at the options, hoping that one of them is going to jump into your face, okay? That's not effective because there's a lot of information here. And if you're just focusing here, you'll actually miss the information when the audio gives the information, okay? So, yeah, so be very, very careful, okay? And what is the biggest problem with this intention theory? So as long as you understood what the intention theory means, that the author gives the meaning, okay, what's a big problem with that? So if we look at the Mona Lisa that was painted by Leonardo da Vinci 500 years ago, and we're trying to figure out why the Mona Lisa is smiling, what's the biggest problem with that? Okay. Well, the biggest problem is we often, we don't have access to the mind of the artist. Leonardo da Vinci is obviously no longer alive, and we have no idea what he was thinking, right? So we all have these kinds of theories of why Mona Lisa is smiling the way that she's smiling in the painting, but we really don't know. We would have to ask da Vinci why he painted that smile, okay? So we don't have access to the mind of the artist, right? So again, the correct answer is A. Now, if you missed these, like if you missed answering question 23 and 24, again, don't panic, because if you understand a little bit later the intention and subjective theory of art, then you can come back and answer these correctly after. So just because you miss a multiple choice question doesn't mean that you can't get it later on, so don't panic. Does everybody catch that? That's kind of a new tip that I haven't given you, okay? Navpreet, good job with A. Navpreet, just once. I don't know what happened there. Did you hit the enter key like 1,000 times or something? Don't do that, okay? Please just enter your responses only once, okay? So, again, if you miss an answer in the listening, do not panic. You can likely come back later and answer it correctly from the information that you hear later on. When I did the IELTS exam, that actually happened to me. So there were a couple of questions that I wasn't 100% sure on or that I missed a little bit. It's very difficult to get all of them correct. And I did get a band 9 in my listening section, so I got at least 39 out of 40. And the way that I was sure about all of my answers virtually is that I just kept listening, and then later on I was like, oh, okay, based on this information, that previous question's answer was, okay? So don't panic, okay? Don't panic, all right? You might be able to solve it later on. Okay. Now we have some fill in the blanks here. All right. According to the host, one of the main goals in art critique is to understand a painting's what. So the host says this word like 100 times. Hopefully everybody got this. All you really had to do was listen to word repetition. So word stress, inflection, deflection, and word repetition gives you a lot of the answers, okay? So according to the host, one of the main goals in critiquing art critique means just giving an opinion, okay? Critique means your opinions, is to understand a painting's meaning. That's right, Lynn. That's right, Carolina. Yeah, it's the meaning, okay? All right. Fatima, I am paying attention. Bekruz, I'm paying attention. So keep giving your answers. Irfan, Navpreet, good. Yeah, meaning. Rashika, very nice. Yeah, so, yeah. And you don't have to go too far when we're looking at art pieces. We're like, oh, what is that? What does it mean? And we're like, oh, it's a painting of a dog chasing a cat. Okay, number 26. The guest responds that art is not something what we want it to be. But that we must also participate in critique and interpretation. So art is not, and he uses a specific word here. Phuc Vinh Le says mainly. Lo Shibek, hello. Get in there. Okay, Jyoti says merely. Mohit and Carolina agree. Yeah, merely means just. And you really just had to catch this word merely. Yeah, merely. It's not just what we want it to be, but that we must also participate in the critique. So if it's a dog chasing a cat because the cat has a funny tail, according to the viewer, then that's our participation. Okay, so the word there was merely. So it's meaning and merely. All right, here we had a table completion, and now we can see these categories. So you see the situation, you see the intention theory, means the author's meaning, and the subjective meaning theory. So subjective meaning theory, we can almost say the viewer's meaning. Okay? So the interpretation of the author and the interpretation of the viewer. Okay, so the critic thinks critically about an artwork and judges it to have no meaning. The intention theory, so the author's meaning, the critic is right or wrong, and here, according to the subjective meaning theory, the critic is right. So if they thought long and hard about it and they say, well, it just looks like a blue smear on a piece of paper, then it's right. And we can see that it's a 50-50. So even if you're like, I'm having difficulty with this, it's either wrong or right. So it's wrong or right or wrong. So you've got a 50-50. Paul O'Ree says the critic is wrong. Yeah, because according to the intention theory, the author always gives it a meaning. So if I do this, and you say, okay, well, Adrian, it's got no meaning. According to the subjective theory, you're right, but according to the intention theory, you're wrong, because I say that this is Lake Ontario. And if you look at a map, Lake Ontario kind of looks like that. So you didn't know that, you have no idea, but according to the intention theory, you're wrong because I can give that meaning. Okay, I can say that that's Lake Ontario. Okay. All right. So the critic does not think critically about an artwork and judges it to have no meaning. Critic is wrong. Okay. And here the critic is, according to the subjective theory, so the critic does not think critically. Number 28, wrong, yeah. So this author says that one very important part of the subjective meaning theory is that if you're looking at a painting, you have to sit there for a while. You have to look at it. And maybe some of you would say, well, yeah, that's why this kind of drawing by Adrian, who's from Canada, has meaning, because maybe he's drawing something of the Canadian landscape that looks like that, right? So you have to think critically about it. Okay, I'm just making that up, but that's the idea. Okay, critic understands the author's meaning. The critic is something. The critic is right. Keep it simple. It's a happy stick man. Does everybody else see a happy stick man? Bhavish Kumari says right. And right you are, Jyoti Harwinder. Yeah, everybody sees the happy stick man. So you're right, I'm right, we're all right. Okay, so wrong, wrong, right. This question, or these questions, seem tricky and really difficult, and some of you are probably nodding your heads right now going, yeah, those are some tough questions. But really, if you look at them carefully and you understand this concept of intention theory and subjective meaning theory, then it's actually not that bad. It makes a lot of sense. Okay? So, okay, we have question 30. An art critic is viewing a painting for the first time and wants to critique it using the subjective meaning theory. It means that they are looking at it and trying to understand it as the viewer. Determine whether the critic has satisfied the constraints of the theory with regard to the critique of the painting. Write the correct letter A, B. Okay, the critic has satisfied the demands of the theory, so they do what they should. The critic has not satisfied the demands, so they don't do what they should. The critic looks at the painting for a moment and concludes from his initial impression that the painting lacks aesthetic value. Lacks aesthetic value is just a very tricky way to say it's not beautiful. Okay, aesthetics is the concept of beauty. So lack, meaning not having, beauty, value, it's not beautiful. So again, here's my happy stick man. I'm going to give it some nice big shoes and a wavy hand and a round hand. You look at this for 2 seconds and you say, hey, Adrian, that's ugly. Have you satisfied the demand of the theory or not? Okay. All right. Yeah, Mal says it's the diplomatic way of saying it's ugly. So in this case, the answer is B, and you've done a very good job, Mystical Web, because this theory says that you have to actually really look at it. And if you're really looking at this very carefully, you will notice that it's very, very beautiful. Okay? It's a beautiful, beautiful drawing of a big-nosed clown with great ears and these funny shoes. And there we go. It's a very beautiful drawing. Now you realize that, yeah, that's a beautiful drawing. So that way you would have satisfied it. But just by looking at it for a moment, you really haven't satisfied that. And so there we go. All right. So the correct answer was that. Okay, everyone. So that's part 3. Let's get right into part 4. We're going to do part 4 nice and smooth and nice and quick as part 4 goes. Part 4, there are no breaks. You have to answer all 10 questions in a series. And then we'll add up our answers and we'll see how we did, especially for those students who were here yesterday as well. Okay? All right. So here we go, everyone. Let's get into part 4. Okay, I'm going to play the audio again. Don't put your answers in the chat. Wait until the end. We'll share them together. Here we go, everyone, with part 4 of this listening exam, the last part.
Now turn to section 4. Take some time to look at questions 31 to 40. Listening section 4. You will hear a lecture about road infrastructure and its connection to economic prosperity. Now listen carefully and answer questions 31 to 40.
Roads have been connected to economic prosperity for millennia. The first roads were thought to have been created by repeated animal grazing and then utilized by humans as ready-made routes for travel between adjacent lands. These roads, evidence for which exists going back 12,000 years, were likely not connected so much to economic prosperity as to survival itself. These roads allowed hunter-gatherers faster access to greater swaths of land. The first paved roads were used in ancient Egypt about 4,500 years ago. Historians theorize that these roads were the first roads used for trade in our history. These roads also would have been used to transport items, such as building supplies. Though rivers were much more practical thoroughfares for the transport of goods, certain goods from certain areas could not be transported by boat, and this necessitated the creation of roads for economic reasons. The Silk Road, though not precisely a road, is one of the most famous trade routes in history. Composed of many types of road, the Silk Road stretched from China and Thailand in the east all the way through the Middle East and terminating in Western Europe. These different routes of the Silk Road brought myriad items from the east to the west, including, of course, silk. This brought economic prosperity to China and surrounding regions for many centuries. The Silk Road was so valuable for commerce that it persisted for over 1,500 years. The Roman Empire was the first major manufacturer of a system of roads. At its height, the Roman Empire contained 29 major roads, totaling over 75,000 kilometers. That's enough road to go around the world twice. Notably, this is almost the precise total length of the modern United States interstate highway system. These roads connected the vast lands of the empire and brought an intertwined economic prosperity to the diverse regions of the empire. Furthermore, the roads were used for military transportation, giving the Romans a massive strategic advantage over their less advanced adversaries. Through the Middle Ages, roads continued to be built and used for trade and commerce, though technological advances were virtually non-existent. Though tar-based roads were used briefly in the Arab Empire in the 8th century, this technology would not take off for another millennium. Today, our roads and highways connect our communities, countries, and economies. They are the modern trade routes by which we are all connected to each other. The modern world would not be possible without the vast expanse of road infrastructure. One interesting development in the history of road infrastructure was the advent of underground systems. The first such system, the London Underground, opened in 1863. Such subterranean routes greatly increase the volume of human life that a city can sustain, thus increasing that city's economic output. London would not be a fraction of the economic powerhouse it is today without its underground rail system. The same can be said for virtually every other major economic centre. Underground systems are the next generation of economic generators. While roads move goods which create economic prosperity, underground systems move human capital, which creates further economic prosperity. What is the next great advance in ground transportation? Some futurists have theorized about a system of tubes propelled by air pressure or other means, which would transport individuals vast distances in short times. Such a system could move humans at unprecedented speeds, perhaps with an economic footprint far less than that of subterranean networks. Such tubes could even be built underwater. Imagine such a system connecting New York to London or Tokyo to San Francisco. It would be incredible. Whatever lies ahead for humanity, roads have gotten us to where we are, and they are very likely to play a prominent role in getting us to where we will be next, in one form or another.
That is the end of section 4. You will now have half a minute to check your answers.
And again, students, always use that half minute to check your answers. All right, let's go through the answers together now. Here we go. So, write no more than 2 words for each answer, filling in the blanks. Nice and quick. What phenomenon created the first roads? And this is still happening today. If you love nature, if you go to parks and such, you might actually see some of this. Okay? So, what created the first roads for humans to use in our ancestry? Harvinder Shran says animal grazing. Yeah, so animals, usually bigger animals like deer and bison and elephants and such, just chewing their way through the forests, created, and of course stomping their feet, created these roads. So animal grazing. Grazing is when you see animals chewing the grass, moving along, eating the grass, okay? Animal grazing, all right? Very good. It's not repeated animal grazing, Bisha, because it's no more than 2 words. If you write 3 words, you'll get it wrong, so be really careful, okay? All right. Animal grazing it is. Though roads were necessary for the transportation of many goods, what was a much more practical thoroughfare? Thoroughfare meaning transportation method for the transport of goods in ancient times. So yeah, roads were good, but a long, long time ago, especially think of Egypt, the Nile, or Europe, the Danube, China, the Yangtze River, okay? Or the Amazon River in Central America, the Tigris in Central Asia, okay? Rivers, right? Rivers, yeah. So rivers, plural, rivers. Rivers were much more common. Very good, okay? Again, if you visualize this, you can get it. All right, which of these roads total approximately 75,000 kilometers? The United States interstate system, ancient Egyptian road network, ancient Roman road network, the Silk Road. I'll give you a hint. It's only 2 of these. They have to be huge, basically, right? So is it A, United States and Roman roads, B, all of them, or C, 1, 3, and 4? The correct answer is, yeah, A. Okay, so United States interstate system and the ancient Roman road network. Lots of road, 75,000. So A is the correct answer there. You just had to listen to that All right, what were the two benefits? So again, 34, 35 of the Roman road system. Economic prosperity for the city of Rome. Oh, that's weird. City of Rome? No, it's the Empire of Rome. B, increased mobility of the Roman armies. That definitely sounds like a good one, right? Moving around the military. Rapid technological advances, the importation of luxury goods from China, broad economic prosperity for the empire. Carolina says it's B and E. Increased Roman armies and economic prosperity for the empire. Jyoti agrees with that. And D, no, it was more than just that. Rome traded with Egypt, traded with the Arabic nations, traded in a lot of different directions, traded with the Prussians, so not just China. The correct answers here are definitely B and E. Okay, so if you got those, you get 2. If you only got 1, you get 1. If you get none, you get none. Okay, here you had to choose the correct letter. So applies to ancient roads, so roads from centuries past. Applies to the subway system, so the metro, the tube. Applies to future transportation, so going into the future, Star Trek, the teleportation and such. D, applies to all of them, past, present, future, subways. Okay. Increases economic activity. Ancient roads, subways, future transportation system, 36. Which one? A, B, C, or all of the above? D. D. We just talked about the Roman roads being used for economic activity. Subways, for sure, they move human economic activity, right? Businessmen, businesswomen, to and from work. And I'm sure in the future, we're going to be transporting money through roads, right? So D is the right answer here. Okay, all of them. Okay, responsible for the growth of modern cities. So modern cities getting bigger, New York, Tokyo, Budapest. Which one? Ancient roads, modern cities. Man, that doesn't make sense. Applies to the subway system. That looks pretty good. Applies to future transportation. Well, we don't know that because it hasn't come yet. So B is correct here. Okay, logic, everyone. Used for military transportation. Ancient roads used for military transportation. Yes, we talked about the Roman armies. Subway systems used for military transportation systems. Okay. Has anybody seen any soldiers on the subway hanging on? Where are you going? I'm going to war. No, I haven't seen that, thankfully. It'd be a horrible idea, too. All the enemy has to do is just collapse the tunnel, and there go the soldiers. So, probably has happened. I'm pretty sure soldiers have been transported in secret underground, but not to the best of our knowledge, according to this information. So, future transport, so used for military transportation, A is the sure answer. Always go with the sure answer, right? Okay. All right. Moves human capital, so moves people. Okay. Look at the tense. It's not moved. It's not will move, but it moves human capital now. Okay. So what do you think? Moves human capital. 39. I would probably go with subway, right? Just Sue agrees. Okay. Yeah. And Last one, will move humans at unprecedented speeds around the world. So again, if you see moves and then will move, now you've probably figured out that this one is C. Okay. Right? Yeah, that looks good. This one, so, yeah, this one, yeah, moves. Look at the present tense. Ancient roads don't move human capital anymore, so that's how we know that that's wrong, okay? All right, so there's all of our answers, all right? Pay attention to the tense of verbs in these kinds of questions especially, okay, when you're dealing with future, past, and present. All right, students, how did you do out of 40? So I know that a lot of you were in today's class and yesterday's class. What was your raw score out of 40? Let's figure out what your score is according to the IELTS bands. And there's a really easy way you can do that. So you can go to our website, aehelp.com or gltshelp.com. I'm going to do that right now. I'll jump over to our website. And at the bottom of our website, okay, you're going to find a thing called a score calculator. Okay. And when you click that score calculator, let me just darken this a touch so you can see that. Okay. So when you go to that score calculator, see how you have the listening section here? And then you have your raw score, so you can put it in. So Hoang Nguyen says, well, yesterday and today together I got 32. So Hoang, you got 7.5 according to the IELTS for your 32. Okay. Quan Tran Vu got 30. Yeah, 2 marks less and you're at band 7. Okay. Nut 31 is a band 7 as well. So 7.5 obviously starts at 32. Okay, so if you get more than 8 wrong, you're an under 7.5. So those high marks are pretty tricky to get, okay? John got 35. 35 is a band 8. Okay. Rapa's S38 is going to be an 8.5. Mohit 33, I believe, is still a 7.5. Yeah, there you go. So you can check out the score calculator. This one's for the reading section. If you're doing academic, use the academic website because the reading section's different for the general IELTS. So for general IELTS reading, make sure to use the score calculator on the general IELTS, okay? And again, students, if you like this lesson and you want lots of great materials and videos in HD, just click these big buttons on the website to join the premium package. It doesn't really cost very much, and it's there to help you. Our main goal is for you to succeed on the IELTS exam. That's what motivates us to do our work. So click those big red buttons. You can use your mobile apps as well. For the general IELTS, it's gltshelp.com. Same idea. Click that big red button. Thank you, Carolina, for moderating this class. Keep up the good work, everyone. Remember to practice listening for intonation, inflections, deflections, okay? And enjoy the rest of your day. Have a good start to the weekend. I will be back tomorrow with questions and answers for our members, okay? And we will have a speaking part 3 class for everyone. I'm Adrian, and I'm signing out from beautiful Victoria here, the capital city of British Columbia in Western Canada. Bye for now. See you tomorrow, everyone. Much love to all of you.